So I'm going to go right into my questions, and unfortunately, although I have about 3 or 4 questions for each one of you, I will limit it, luckily for all of you, to one.
You can take 45 minutes if you want.
Okay. So before I open it up, unless you have a technical question, let me hold your questions, write them down. I'm going to start off with a round of questions, and then I will open it up. I think the first thing I want to say is, first of all, thank you for excellent presentations. It really brings it together. I think that one of the themes that I hear coming out a little bit in common is that this has to be a slow, gradual process that is contingent upon building trust. Okay? I want to call that into question. I think if there's one thing we learned from the Oslo process, it's the fact that it was long and drawn out and phased and conditional, left it very vulnerable to breaches of trust that in the end undermined the process, and the conditionality meant that it stopped because of those breaches of trust. And I think that I see in all of your presentations aspects that, to some extent can get underway already. And I want to talk about those a little bit and ask you about them. So that will be somewhat of a common theme. And I think I will start with Ofer because you waited a long time to speak, so I'll start with you. When you talk about these different institutions and the slow, gradual buildup, the way we talk about, preserving the conditions, we used to talk about preserving the conditions for a two-state solution. Can you think of certain steps along the way of that process that can be put into place now or in an earlier stage that would help set the stage for a future, progress towards this kind of vision? I'm sorry we have to pass the mic back and forth unless you can use that one. Can any of the examples you gave be put underway already?
I think what we need to do now is to create a model through non-governmental organizations. I think grassroots has a lot to do. For example, to have a tribunal of human rights, Human Rights International Tribunal, thinking about all these issues that need to be considered. For example, reparations. Mm-hmm. How do you create reparations given the model that is offered by IPCRI? Mm-hmm. We would need to compensate more perhaps than we thought about, given Oslo themes of relocation. We are not talking about relocation of major settlements. So we need to have an investment in compensation on allowing Palestinians to rebuild their lives, given that they are going to be surrounded by settlements. So this is an aspect we can work on right now, and I would like to briefly
very briefly, so we can give everybody.
Yeah, but the issue of trust, I think Oslo did not have any investment in trust building. Mm-hmm. Although there was people to people, and I'm fully aware of that, but it failed, unfortunately. And what we can do is incorporate trust building and define trust building as a major aspect of everything that we are doing here.
Okay. Now I want to go back to both of the people who dealt with refugees, because you spoke a long time ago. I guess I have a similar question. What can start now? And I guess what I'd like to do, since I have the advantage of having an Israeli and a Palestinian, is what I don't think I mentioned to the audience that I'm actually a public opinion researcher. For 15 years I've been researching these issues, mostly related to the conflict. And I can tell you that on the Israeli side, that the issue of Palestinian refugees, just touching that issue, even asking Israelis to acknowledge that Israel had a role in creating the Palestinian refugee situation, is rejected consistently by 60 to 80% of the Israeli public, and is the biggest sticking point in an agreement, usually, not always, but usually bigger than the Jerusalem obstacle. So how do we open the minds of Israelis to even address the issue at the levels that you were talking about? I would propose this has to start sooner rather than later, so that in the later event we get to an agreement, it will be more ripe. And Huda, on the Palestinian side, I guess my question is this entirely an internal Palestinian process of opening up the ideas to creative other solutions? Can you learn from other examples of refugees and conflict in other areas? What can start now to make that happen, so that when there is a negotiation, inshallah, Bezrat Hashem, one day, there will be ripeness for it? And again, please, I'm sorry, but try to keep your answers brief so we can get to the audience.
Okay, well, my research group dealt more with the model for a solution than with the model for a struggle for a solution. And yes, it demands a struggle. I mean, national struggles and international struggles for justice and peace are needed by both sides. The refugee problem, as you said, this is true. The Israeli side does not acknowledge the refugee problem as a vital part of the solution, and if anyone acknowledges it, it is usually as something that needs to be solved at a symbolic level. Yeah, I mean, if somebody is already wants peace and wants agreements, then we say, okay, so a symbolic right of return will be acknowledged, and maybe some 10,000 people will be able to return as a symbolic act. While if you listen to the Palestinians and if you listen to the refugees, you understand that there is no Palestinian, there's not one Palestinian political movement or body or group that will even consider such a solution. And this is why this is the biggest gap that we have in the conflict, and I agree. This is why I think this is so important to me too. And for this, I think we need several steps. I think we need to do several things. First of all, for the Palestinian side, I think, me as an Israeli, I have, maybe you can challenge the question of what was my right to say so. But I think that the Palestinian side needs to emphasize the demand of the refugees in the national struggle, in the everyday language, because the everyday struggle of the Palestinians is I mean, this is thanks to the situation, a struggle against military occupation, because people living under military occupation are basically fighting against the army. First of all, fighting against the Israeli control over their houses and their lands. But if the Palestinian refugees struggle is not included as a part of the demand all the time, then the Israeli side is easily forgetting it, and it wants to forget it. And this is one side. Me as an Israeli, I have the mission or the goal of presenting the Palestinian refugees problem as something that is in the core of the conflict and in the core of the solution. For this, I think we needed these two steps. I think this research is very much needed in order to be able to present to the Israelis a solution that is viable, a solution that is not doing what most Israelis think of, saying, okay, now the Palestinians, the refugees are going to get to return home, and we'll have to leave, because this is usually how it is understood. So first, we need to give hope. We need to give an idea of a fulfillment of the right of return, which is not creating a new system of uprooting and injustice. And then the other thing, yes, we need to talk about it and to put it in the core of the struggle in our side as well. Not to neglect it and not to put it aside and not to leave it to some, okay, there's some just solution by the UN resolutions. No, it's not enough. We need to talk about the actual details and the actual steps that are needed to be taken from the beginning, immediately, and not at the end of the process, so that living together will be a real possibility.
I think it's internal, and I think it's the most important part of the whole process is to start from home. Again, home, psychologically speaking, physically speaking, politically speaking, we have, as Palestinian people, to sit together and work together before we present any solutions. One of the main things that happened with me while talking to refugees was I had to acknowledge that I'm wholeheartedly standing with the right of return. There's no questioning of it. They would not speak to me if I say I question it. They would ask me, are you here to question the right of return? And I would say, no. I am someone who's firmly believes in it as a person who wants justice. But further down the conversation, there were so many creative ways to find a solution. The question is, did we actually have that conversation as Palestinians internally or not? If we did, where are the results of it? How is it presented in the negotiation process? How is it going to be represented in this framework, in this new framework?